It wasn't the courtroom that almost broke Alicia Monroe. Not the judges who wielded their gavels like props and talked over her with the practiced boredom of men who'd never been interrupted in their lives. Not the smirking prosecutors who made counselor sound like girl, dragging the word through caramel and condescension. Not even the nights she stitched cases together with coffee and stubbornness, building something like a lifeline for clients who arrived at her office with shaking hands and stories that bent a spine. No, what almost broke Alicia was standing in her own driveway at dusk with blood drying in a copper smile on her lip and her knuckles aching like old truths. Red and blue lights spun across her street like carnival lies. A police captain with a neatly knotted tie and a face the color of new ash held out an official envelope as if he were handing her an invitation to disappear. "Ma'am," he said, voice flat as asphalt. "Effective immediately, you're suspended from practice pending investigation into your unstable conduct." Neighbors watched from behind curtains. Somebody filmed, somebody always filmed. Somewhere, a dog barked like it had heard this story before. On the porch, her 14-year-old daughter, Simone, was calling her name, not Mom, not Mama, but Alicia, the way she had as a toddler when the word Mom felt too soft to hold fear. Alicia looked at the captain's outstretched hand, at the envelope, at the badge on his chest, at the way his eyes flicked toward the cameras like this was theater and she was late for her cue. She felt the weight of 1,000 clients behind her. She felt the weight of every time she had said to a shaking person on a plastic chair, "We'll fight. The truth will stand." For the first time in a long time, the truth felt like it needed a cane. But that wasn't where her story started. It started, as most wars do, on an afternoon that had no business turning into one. Saturday's sunlight poured itself through the kitchen window in soft squares, turning the clutter, unopened mail, a dying basil plant, Simone's half-finished algebra worksheet, into something almost worth photographing. Alicia stood barefoot at the stove, stirring sugar into coffee, humming to a song that wasn't actually playing. The house held that rarest of sounds, nothing urgent. Simone shuffled in like a small comet in a t-shirt 2 sizes too big, one sock on, hair a sleep-tangled crown. She kissed Alicia's shoulder, a ritual, and opened the fridge as if the answer to every problem waited between the oat milk and a jar of pickles. "Bookstore," she said around a yawn. "Then lemon ice at Tito's?" Alicia hid a smile behind her mug. "Only if you promise not to buy out the entire YA section again." "No promises," Simone said, brightening. She poured cereal that came out in a rush and cursed softly when it spilled. The word died halfway, they both laughed, the sound light as flour. For once, there were no filings due, no depositions to prep, no voicemail filled with voices whose fear turned even the truth timid. Alicia let herself feel the empty calendar like a blessing. Her phone face down on the counter. Her inbox unopened. The day stretched ahead like a road with no speed limits and too few drivers. They moved through their rituals with the lazy choreography of people who like each other. Alicia loaded the dishwasher and pretended not to reload Simone's half-hearted attempt. Simone pretended not to see. In the mirror by the door, Alicia tugged her curls into a low puff and dabbed lemon balm on her neck. Simone stuck a star sticker to Alicia's wrist. "Court victory charm," she said, even though there was no court today. "Court victory charm," Alicia agreed, pretending to believe in magic that wasn't the law. 40 minutes later, the car hummed down Elm Street, windows cracked just enough to let the breeze lift the edge of their music. They bartered for the playlist, 2 of Simone's glittering synth ballads for one of Alicia's classics. Simone mocked the chorus, off-key and dramatic. Alicia sang backup, softer, a little shy, like a memory that had learned to carry a tune. At the indie bookstore, a shop cat named Ruth Bader Ginsburg guarded a stack of paperbacks with the authority of a tiny judge. Simone whispered, "All rise," and the clerk snorted. Alicia bought one novel she pretended would be a beach read and would actually make her cry at 2 a.m. Simone bought 3 and slipped a 4th into the growing tote. Alicia pretended not to see, mothers choose their battles, and this wasn't one of them. Outside, the farmer's market smelled like peaches, dill, and sun-warm bread. Alicia bought too many sunflowers from a teenager with chipped nail polish and a smile that said tips went to gas money. Simone wrinkled her nose at a jar labeled fermented pickled garlic, like it was an accusation. They split a paper boat of kettle corn, fingers sugared, the world briefly downgraded from crisis to snack. The park tucked behind Main Street wasn't much, it never needed to be. A small green scoop between a playground and a fountain that always seemed half surprised to be working. A maple tree named after nobody in particular threw generous shade. An old man with a newspaper occupied the sunniest bench as if he paid the bill for light. Two toddlers darted after bubbles, shrieking like joy had just been invented. Alicia and Simone chose a patch of grass and shrugged a blanket over it. They laid out their spoils like offerings, paperbacks, lemon ice, a portable speaker that they didn't turn on. Simone flopped onto her stomach, propped on elbows, chin in her hands. Alicia stretched her legs and leaned back on her palms, eyes tilted toward a sky that looked newly painted. For a handful of minutes that felt like a thin miracle, nothing demanded anything of them. The air was ordinary. The kind of ordinary that takes years to earn. "Do we have to go to Aunt Liv's tonight?" Simone asked without looking up from her book. "That depends," Alicia said, teasing. "Are you ready to be interrogated about your grades, your friends, and your future career as a biomedical engineer?" "Gross," Simone said. Then, after a beat, quieter, "Maybe she won't ask this time." "She will," Alicia said, not unkindly. "She loves you by giving you a plan. You love me by giving me French fries. We contain multitudes." They smiled sideways at each other and slipped back into their parallel silences, the kind shared by people who know they are safe in the same air. A gull cried. Somewhere, somebody's phone pinged and then shut up. The fountain burbled like a polite guest. That's when Alicia felt it. Not a sound. Not even a sight. A shift. The kind of shift you learn to hear in courtrooms and police stations and waiting rooms where decisions get made in the space between what's said and what's meant. The air went heavier by a gram. Alicia's gaze slid left. At a picnic table, a couple in their 50s sat stiff as folded chairs. The woman's gaze was not curious, it was measuring. The man held his phone half hidden, screen tilted toward his mouth. The woman spoke without moving her lips much, the way people talk when they believe the wind is on their side. Simone's eyes flicked up, reading her mother's shoulders before she read her mother's face. "What?" "It's fine," Alicia said. And meant, "Be ready." 12 years as a civil rights attorney had taught Alicia to read a room the way a violinist reads a bridge, by feel, by tension. Juries who locked ankles under chairs when they were done listening. Officers who called her "ma'am" with a softness that had the weight of a shove. She recognized the song the air was starting to sing. She didn't like its key. They tried to ignore it. They ate spoonfuls of lemon ice and argued about book covers. Simone read the first paragraph aloud in a mock British accent until Alicia's laugh escaped her chest like a bird. The old man turned a page. A stroller squeaked. The breeze dragged its feet. Alicia flipped her phone and left it face down again. A patrol car drifted past the park entrance and kept going. Alicia felt the clench between her shoulders loosen by a thread. She made herself inhale through her nose and exhale through her mouth, the way her therapist had insisted she practice when the job tightened her chest too much. Then the same patrol car drifted past again. This time slower. This time with a gaze you feel before you meet it. Simone sat up, one earbud out, mouth suddenly serious around a joke she swallowed. "Mom." Alicia kept her eyes on the sky because she didn't want to give the car the courtesy of a glance. "Hey," she said softly, the syllable carrying more instructions than sound. "Eyes on me. If anything happens, we breathe in fours, okay? In through the nose, out through the mouth. We do not run. We do not fill the spaces they open. We make them earn every inch. Simone nodded. Fours, she said, like a password. They returned, deliberately, to their small bright tasks. Simone drew a cartoon cat in the margin of her book. Alicia took a photo of the sunflowers on the blanket and didn't post it anywhere. She let the thought that the day could stay ordinary bloom and then set it down, gently, beside the plastic spoons. The patrol car turned into the gravel lot. It parked with the practiced slowness of people who know they are most powerful when they perform calm. 2 officers stepped out. The taller one wore authority like an accessory. His jaw tightened against a smirk he thought was private. The shorter one wore authority like armor. It didn't fit, but he was afraid to take it off. They walked across the grass, the couple at the picnic table watching with the alertness of people who believe calling 911 makes them brave. The old man lowered his newspaper an inch. "Afternoon, ma'am," the taller officer said, tone a shade too polite to be polite. "Afternoon," Alicia said. Her voice came out even. Her pulse did not. "We received a call," the shorter one added, glancing at the couple who pretended to be surprised by his voice. "Possible suspicious activity." "In a public park," Alicia said, "on a Saturday afternoon." The taller officer's gaze slid to Simone, then back, and the look was exactly the length of an insult. "We'll need to see some identification." Alicia's tongue tasted lemon and something metallic. She lifted her tote slowly, elbows visible, hands open. "My wallet is right here." The taller officer's fingers twitched near his holster. Simone's breath snagged. The old man's knuckles whitened around his newspaper. "Easy," Alicia murmured, to the officer, to her daughter, to the air. She passed over her ID. "Alicia Monroe. I'm an attorney. This is my daughter, Simone." "Attorney," the taller officer said, making the word 2 inches shorter. "Civil rights," Alicia said. "Which includes ours." He looked at the ID, then at her face, then at the ID again as if the distance between ink and skin offended him. "We've had reports," he said, vague enough to be useless and weapon enough to be familiar. "From whom?" Alicia asked. "And articulating what, exactly?" "Ma'am, don't make this harder than it has to be." Alicia let a sliver of steel thread her voice. "Hard is the part where you explain on camera why you're detaining a mother and her child in a park with no reasonable suspicion of a crime." Phones appeared like dandelions. A jogger slowed, chest heaving, thumb already pressing record. A woman pulled her toddler closer without knowing why. The fountain pretended it could drown out the sound of a story starting. Simone's thumb hovered over the red circle on her phone screen. She looked at Alicia. Alicia nodded once. The little red light glowed like a tiny defiant star. "Turn that off," the taller officer snapped, composure cracking along a seam you had to be close to see. "No," Alicia said, calm as case law. "She has every right to record." A murmur moved through the spectators, a yes, a good, a mmh, the quiet chorus of strangers who needed someone to say what they knew without knowing how to say it. The officer's radio crackled, static and codes. "Backup." The word didn't arrive, but the feeling did. Simone's fingers tightened around Alicia's wrist. Alicia didn't look away from the officer when she squeezed back. "Fours," she whispered. "In, out." Simone breathed. The maple leaves whispered. A second patrol car turned into the lot and rolled to a patient stop. 2 more officers stepped out, one older, a sergeant by the bars on his collar, eyes the color of sunburned edges, one younger, nerves wearing him like a small suit. The sergeant didn't look at Alicia first. He scanned the crowd, counted phones, found the couple at the picnic table, found the old man with the newspaper. Then he stepped forward, chin tipped like a man who preferred down to up. "Afternoon," he said, to no one and everyone. "What's the issue?" The taller officer gestured with an open hand that still managed to feel like a shove. Concerned citizen called. Possible abduction. Subject uncooperative. Subject, Simone repeated under her breath, and Alicia felt the word bruise inside her. Alicia met the sergeant's eyes and didn't blink. I presented identification. You have no reasonable suspicion. We're sitting in a public park. We are leaving now. The sergeant finally looked at Simone. The glance slid off like he was checking the weather. Ma'am, he said to Alicia, if you've got nothing to hide, there's no harm in cooperating. Cooperation, Alicia said, voice even, is obeying the law. The law says you don't question a minor without a guardian or counsel. Today, she has both. The sergeant's mouth twitched like it had remembered how to be a smile and decided against it. He nodded once to the taller officer. Alicia felt the world tip, the way a glass does just before it shatters. Okay, she said to the space between them. The second cruiser rolled to a stop with the deliberate calm of a predator that knows its prey is already cornered. Tires crunched softly against gravel, doors opened with sharp, confident clicks. Two more officers stepped out. One older, stocky, a sergeant, the silver bars on his collar gleaming in the sun. His skin looked sunburned around the edges, the kind of burn you get from too many hours standing on blacktop, waiting for trouble you secretly hope will come. The other one younger, maybe mid-20s, maybe too young for the badge, shifting his weight like his uniform didn't quite fit. His eyes kept darting to the crowd, the phones already up, blinking red lights like small, defiant stars. The sergeant didn't look at Alicia first. He scanned the scene like a man counting chess pieces, the couple at the picnic table, the jogger frozen mid-step, the old man with the rolled-up newspaper now held tight in one hand. Then his eyes settled on Alicia and Simone, and something in his expression clicked into place. He started walking, slow, deliberate steps that carried the quiet authority of someone used to deciding where a moment would go. Afternoon, he said, voice loud enough for everyone to hear, but flat, devoid of anything that could be mistaken for humanity. Alicia didn't move. Afternoon, she said back, matching his tone beat for beat. The taller officer, the one who had first approached them, gestured with his hand, like a magician revealing a trick. Concerned citizen call, he said, his voice louder now, meant for the crowd. Possible abduction. Subject uncooperative. Subject. The word landed like a slap, sharp and deliberate. Simone flinched beside her. Alicia didn't blink. I've provided identification, she said, her voice steady, the lawyer in her coiled and ready. You have no reasonable suspicion of a crime. My daughter and I are sitting in a public park, enjoying a Saturday afternoon. That is not against the law. The sergeant tilted his head slightly, considering her like she was an exhibit. If you've got nothing to hide, he said, then there's no harm in cooperating. That word again. Cooperating. As if existing wasn't already cooperation. As if breathing wasn't already permission granted and received. Cooperating, Alicia said, her voice low but sharp enough to cut through the murmurs of the crowd, is following the law. And the law says you don't question a minor without a guardian or counsel. Today, she has both. Simone squeezed her mother's hand, fingers trembling, but her gaze fixed forward. The younger officer shifted nervously, his eyes flicking to the couple who were now standing, whispering to each other like conspirators congratulating themselves. She was watching the children, the woman called, her voice thin but carrying. Walking back and forth. It didn't seem right. There it was. The invisible accusation given shape, dressed in concern. Simone turned, voice sharp, too loud for her small frame. We were reading. The sergeant didn't even glance at her. His gaze stayed locked on Alicia, calm, cold, certain. Ma'am, he said, we're going to need to ask your daughter a few questions. Protocol. No, Alicia said, firm, quiet. You're not questioning my daughter without me present. You know that. And you know you don't have grounds for a detention. So unless you're ready to explain, on camera, exactly what you're doing here, we're leaving now. A ripple went through the crowd, a jogger muttered, "She's right," under his breath. Someone else whispered, "They're overstepping." But the officers weren't listening. The sergeant took one more slow step closer. His shadow stretched across the blanket where their books and half-melted lemon ice sat like abandoned offerings. "Ma'am," he said again, "stand up." Simone's grip tightened, her nails biting into Alicia's palm. Alicia rose, slow and deliberate, pulling Simone gently up with her. She didn't look away from the sergeant. "Hands where I can see them," the taller officer said, his voice carrying a new edge. "My hands," Alicia said, raising them slightly, palms open, "are right here. I am not resisting. I am not detained. And unless you have probable cause." The sergeant moved his hand, a small, sharp gesture. The taller officer stepped in. It happened fast, but not fast enough to surprise Alicia. She had seen that look before. She had argued cases built on that exact second, the moment someone decided that power was justification enough. His hand closed around her wrist, tight, unforgiving. Simone screamed. The crowd gasped. And Alicia, every muscle trained by years of courtroom restraint and late-night runs to bleed the anger out, stayed perfectly still. "You do not," she said, her voice low, steady, lethal, "have the right to touch me. I am not under arrest. I am not a threat. My daughter is filming. There are a dozen witnesses here. Remove your hand." The officer didn't move. Instead, his grip tightened. Simone sobbed out a single word, "Mom." That cut through the hot, heavy air like glass breaking. "Keep filming," Alicia said, never looking away from the sergeant. Her voice was sharp now, a command more than a plea. "Do not stop." The sergeant's expression didn't change. "Ma'am," he said, "for your safety and ours, we're placing you in temporary restraints while we verify your ID. You'll be on your way in no time." "Temporary restraints," Alicia repeated, tasting the lie in every syllable. "You mean detainment? Without cause? On camera?" The crowd murmured again, louder this time. Phones shifted for better angles. Someone called out, "She told you who she is." Simone moved like she wanted to step closer, but the old man with the newspaper, who had abandoned his bench and now stood beside her, put a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Stay back, sweetheart," he murmured. "Let that phone tell the story." The cuffs clicked. Cold steel, unforgiving against skin. The sound carried through the park like a gavel slamming down, final and absolute. Simone's breath broke. And Alicia, lawyer, mother, fighter, lifted her chin, looked the sergeant dead in the eye, and said, "Clear enough for every camera to catch it, this will not end the way you think it will." The taller officer tugged her forward, toward the waiting cruiser, his hand firm at her elbow. Simone tried to follow, but the old man held her steady. "Mom!" Simone cried again, her voice shaking but strong. Alicia twisted her head just enough to meet her daughter's eyes. "Breathe, baby," she said, calm, sharp, sure. "4 in. 4 out. We'll handle this." Simone's chest heaved, but she nodded, clutching the phone like a lifeline. At the cruiser, the sergeant leaned down, voice pitched low but audible to the nearest cameras. "You'll answer a few questions downtown," he said. "Then you can go home. Cooperate, and this will be over faster." Alicia's jaw tightened. "Cooperation," she said, "is not surrender. And you will not rewrite that truth." The door opened. She ducked her head, slid in, her wrists aching where the cuffs bit deep. Through the glass, she saw Simone, small, defiant, phone still up, tears on her cheeks but her hands steady. The old man stood beside her like a guard posted to watch over her until the world made sense again. And as the cruiser pulled away, the park, the quiet green, the fountain, the scattered books, the half-eaten lemon ice, shrank behind her like a life she wasn't sure she'd ever get back. In the back seat, Alicia closed her eyes, inhaled once, steady and deep, and let the fury settle under her ribs where it belonged. This wasn't over. Not by a mile. The ride to the precinct was short but heavy. Gravel crunched under the cruiser's tires as they left the park, the sound swallowed by the low hum of the engine and the static chatter of the radio. In the back seat, Alicia kept her spine straight, wrists resting lightly on her knees despite the cuffs biting into her skin. She forced her breathing into the steady rhythm she'd taught Simone, 4 counts in, 4 counts out, because anger, left unchecked, had teeth, and she couldn't afford to let it bite. Through the tinted glass, the park blurred past, shrinking into a smear of green and sunlight. But what stayed sharp in her mind was Simone. Her small frame standing tall, phone steady, tears streaking her cheeks but her voice strong. That image, that courage, burned brighter than her fear. Inside the precinct, the air was stale and sharp with the scent of paper, ink, and overused coffee. The sergeant walked her past the front desk without so much as a glance. Officers stopped to stare, some curious, some smug, some just blank. Alicia knew that look. She'd seen it 100 times while defending clients dragged through this same system. They processed her like she was a number. Fingerprints. Mug shot. The click of the camera sounded like the crack of a gavel in a courtroom where the verdict was already decided. Hours passed. The cuffs came off but the insult stayed, sitting heavy in her chest. No one explained anything. No one offered water. No one cared that her teenage daughter had been left alone, crying, in a park full of strangers. Finally, near midnight, a duty officer came to her cell door. "You're free to go," he said flatly, sliding paperwork across the table. Alicia stared at the release form, the generic language blurring into meaninglessness. "No charges." "Not this time," he said, without meeting her eyes. "Not this time." Outside, the night was cold and sharp, the kind of cold that made breath look like ghosts. Her sister, Olivia, was waiting by the curb, leaning against her SUV. When she saw Alicia, her face crumpled, anger, relief, heartbreak all twisted together. "Simone?" Alicia asked, her voice cracking for the first time all day. "She's with Mom," Olivia said quickly. "Safe." "But she's scared, Alicia. She saw everything. The videos are everywhere." Alicia blinked, her breath hitching. "Videos?" Olivia nodded toward her phone. "It's viral. Millions of views. Everyone's talking about you." The ride home was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums with things unsaid. Olivia kept glancing over, her jaw tight, her hands gripping the wheel like she wanted to strangle the world. Alicia sat rigid, her phone buzzing endlessly in her lap. She ignored it. She couldn't face the noise, not yet. When they pulled into her driveway, the house looked different, smaller somehow, or maybe just too still. Inside, Simone was curled on the couch under her grandmother's quilt, her eyes swollen from crying but defiant when they found Alicia. "Mom," she whispered. Alicia dropped her bag and crossed the room in 3 strides, gathering Simone into her arms. She didn't care that her wrists ached, that her ribs screamed from where the officer's hand had dug in. She just held her daughter and let the world wait. "Are they going to take you away?" Simone asked into her shoulder, her voice small but steady. "No," Alicia said, her tone sharp enough to make the word true. "No, baby. They don't get to take me away. Ever." Simone pulled back, her chin trembling but her eyes blazing. "I filmed everything. Everyone saw." Alicia cupped her daughter's face, pride and sorrow warring in her chest. "You were so brave," she whispered. "Braver than anyone had the right to be today." Later, after Simone had fallen into an exhausted sleep, Alicia sat at the kitchen table, staring at her phone. The notifications were endless, texts from colleagues, voicemails from reporters, hundreds of social media mentions. She hesitated, then clicked one of the links Olivia had sent. There she was. On screen, the video played. The officer gripping her wrist. Simone's voice, shaking but steady, shouting, "You can't do that." The crowd murmuring. The cuffs snapping shut. And Alicia, chin high, eyes steady, saying, "This will not end the way you think it will." She watched it 3 times, her stomach twisting tighter with each replay. By the 4th, she wasn't seeing the video anymore. She was seeing every client she'd ever defended. Every mother who'd sat across from her, shaking, saying, "They treated me like I was nothing." Every child who'd asked her if their parent was coming home. By morning, her name was everywhere. News anchors debated her behavior. Commentators on social media split into camps, those calling her a hero, those calling her another angry black woman who escalated. The hashtags trended. Hashtag justice for Alicia. Hashtag stand with Simone. Hashtag know your rights. Civil rights organizations reached out. Other attorneys offered support. Strangers sent messages of solidarity and fury. But beneath the swell of public support, Alicia could feel the other current, the quiet, insidious narrative being built by the department. They were calling her aggressive. They were painting her as unstable, dangerous. The same old story, told 1,000 times to justify 1,000 injustices. That afternoon, her closest friend and fellow attorney, Marcus Reed, showed up at her door. "You look like hell," he said softly, dropping a bag of takeout on the counter. "I feel worse," Alicia admitted. Marcus pulled out his laptop and opened a series of files. "They're already spinning this. Internal memos. Press leaks. They're painting you as the problem, Alicia. We need to get ahead of this." Alicia stared at the screen, at the words being used to dismantle her character. "They think if they bury me, they bury the story," she said, her voice flat. "Then we don't let them," Marcus replied. "We take this public. We show the world exactly what they did." That night, Alicia typed her own statement. It was measured, precise, not the roar in her chest, but the cold, sharp truth. "My name is Alicia Monroe. I am an attorney, a mother, and a citizen of this community. On Saturday, my daughter and I were unlawfully detained in a public park. We were harassed, humiliated, and treated as if our existence was a threat. I will not be silent. Not for myself. Not for my daughter. And not for every person who has been told, in 100 ways, that their dignity is disposable." When she hit post, her hands trembled. Within minutes, the message exploded. Support poured in, lawyers, activists, mothers, strangers from across the country, all saying the same thing: "We believe you. We're with you." By the end of the week, the pressure was impossible to ignore. Protests erupted outside the precinct. People carried signs with Simone's shaky but powerful words, "You can't do that." Local news stations ran the footage on repeat, framing Alicia as the face of quiet defiance. And behind closed doors, Alicia worked. She filed complaints. She gathered witness statements. She built her case the way she built every case, brick by brick, fact by fact, until the truth was a wall nothing could knock down. Late one night, long after Simone had gone to bed, Marcus sat across from her, legal pads scattered across the table. "They're scared," he said. "I'm getting calls. Quiet ones. They know this isn't going away." Alicia leaned back, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. "Good," she said softly. "Let them be scared. They should be." She looked toward the hallway, where Simone's backpack lay slumped by the door, her sneakers kicked off in a hurry. "This isn't just about me anymore," she whispered. "It's about her." It's about every kid who deserves to grow up knowing they don't have to beg for dignity. Marcus nodded. Then let's make sure they learn. By morning, the plan was in motion. A press conference. A lawsuit. A movement. And Alicia, tired, bruised, but unbroken, stood in her kitchen, her daughter's quiet breathing drifting down the hall, and whispered to herself, like a promise. They picked the wrong mother. The press conference wasn't supposed to be big. At least, that's what Alicia told herself that morning as she pinned back her curls and buttoned the navy blazer that had become her armor. Small, Marcus had said on the phone the night before. A handful of cameras, a few reporters, some community leaders. Enough to get the story straight before they bury you in their lies. But when she pulled up to the steps of City Hall with Simone in the passenger seat, backpack at her feet, phone clutched like a talisman, she knew Marcus had underestimated the moment. The plaza was full. Dozens of cameras. A sea of signs. Voices chanting her name, chanting Simone's name, chanting the words Simone had screamed in the park, "You can't do that." Simone leaned forward, her face pale. "Mom, is this for us?" Alicia swallowed hard, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "It's for the truth, baby," she said softly. "And the truth belongs to everyone." Marcus met them at the curb, his tie crooked, his eyes shadowed but burning with the sharp light of purpose. "They tried to call an emergency session of the council," he said, his voice low as they walked up the steps. "To pass some nonsense resolution backing the department. Didn't work. Public pressure's too hot. They're scrambling." Alicia adjusted the folder in her arms, heavy with documents, complaints, internal emails, policy memos. Evidence of a system designed to protect itself, no matter the cost. "Good," she said. "Let them scramble." The cameras flashed when she stepped up to the podium, Simone standing just behind her. The crowd quieted, like the city itself was holding its breath. Alicia took one steadying breath and began. "My name is Alicia Monroe. I am a mother. I am an attorney. And on Saturday, my daughter and I were treated not as citizens, not as people, but as problems to be contained. What happened to us is not rare. What happened to us is the reality that too many people in this city live with every day. The only difference is that this time, there was a camera. And because of that camera, because of my daughter's courage, the world saw the truth." The crowd erupted in applause, in cheers that rang against the stone columns like drums of war. Alicia let them, just for a moment, then raised her hand for quiet. "But I need you to understand something. This isn't about me. This isn't just about one mother and her daughter. This is about a system that has decided that some of us are threats simply for existing. And I will not, we will not, be silent. Not now. Not ever again." The rest of the week blurred. Interviews. Meetings with civil rights leaders. Calls from mothers across the country, their voices breaking as they told her stories that sounded too much like her own. And protests, every day, growing bigger, louder, impossible to ignore. Simone stayed close to her side through it all, her quiet strength anchoring Alicia when the noise threatened to drown her. "You okay, baby?" Alicia would ask, and Simone would nod, clutching her phone tighter. "I'm not scared anymore," Simone said one night, her voice small but certain. "Not when you're with me." But for every message of support, there were threats. Anonymous letters slipped under her office door. Calls in the middle of the night. A brick through her front window, a note tied to it in neat, deliberate handwriting. "Stop where you'll wish you had." Marcus wanted her to move. To take Simone somewhere safe until things cooled down. But Alicia shook her head. "This is our home," she said, her jaw tight. "And I won't teach my daughter to run from bullies." Behind the scenes, she worked with a quiet, relentless fury. Public records requests. Witness statements. Leaked documents from officers who were sick of the corruption but too scared to go public. Piece by piece, a picture formed, not of a few bad actors, but of an entire system built to protect itself. Complaints dismissed. Evidence buried. Victims intimidated into silence. Every discovery fueled her fire. "They've been doing this for years," she told Marcus one night, her voice sharp with disbelief and rage. "Decades, maybe. And no one ever stopped them." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes steady. "Then we will." The city tried to fight back. Press conferences painting her as unstable, attention-seeking, dangerous. Anonymous sources whispering to reporters about questionable behavior, about domestic issues, about anything that could chip away at her credibility. But every time they tried, the movement grew louder. Videos of the park incident hit 10 million views. Hashtags flooded timelines. People she'd never met carried signs with her name, with Simone's name, with the words she'd spoken into the cameras: "This will not end the way you think it will." Then came the leak. A junior officer, too young to be fully broken by the system, sent Marcus a flash drive. Internal emails. Training memos. Audio recordings from meetings where supervisors coached officers on narrative management, how to make victims look like aggressors, how to bury complaints before they reached the public. When Alicia opened the files and saw the proof laid bare, her hands trembled. "This is it," Marcus said quietly. "This is what blows it open." The night before the city council hearing, Alicia sat at her kitchen table, the documents spread out in front of her like the pieces of a puzzle she'd been trying to solve her entire career. Simone sat across from her, sketching quietly in her notebook, the tip of her pencil scratching steady lines onto the page. "Can I come tomorrow?" Simone asked without looking up. Alicia hesitated. "Baby, it's going to be a lot. Reporters. Cameras. People yelling. I don't want you to." Simone met her gaze, her eyes clear. "You told me once that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It just means you don't let the fear win. Right?" Alicia felt her throat tighten. "Yeah," she whispered. "Then I want to be brave too," Simone said softly. The next morning, City Hall was a fortress. Barricades lined the steps. Officers stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces blank, their eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses. Reporters jostled for space, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. And in the middle of it all, Alicia walked up the steps, Simone at her side, Marcus just behind them. Every step echoed, sharp and sure. Inside, the council chamber buzzed with tension, supporters packing the rows, officers clustered near the back, their arms crossed, their expressions sharp and hostile. When Alicia took the stand, the room went still. She opened her folder, laid out the documents, and began to speak. "For years," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, "this department has operated with one goal: to protect itself. Not to serve. Not to protect. But to preserve power, no matter the cost. I have here," she continued, holding up a memo, "internal documents detailing how complaints are dismissed before they're ever logged. How evidence is buried. How victims are threatened into silence. How narratives are twisted to make the innocent look guilty, and the guilty untouchable." Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed in on every page, every word. The police union president, a man with a neck too thick for his shirt collar and a voice like gravel, tried to interrupt. "This is nonsense," he barked. "Conspiracy theories from a woman looking for attention." Alicia didn't flinch. "Is it nonsense," she said, her voice sharp, "when it's in your own words? When your own memos lay out how to cover up brutality? When your own emails tell officers to control the narrative before the victims do?" The room erupted, reporters shouting questions, council members demanding order, the crowd roaring in outrage. And through it all, Alicia stood tall, her daughter watching from the front row, her small hands gripping the straps of her backpack like anchors. That night, the news played her testimony on every channel. Clips of her holding up documents, of her words ringing through the chamber, of the stunned silence that followed her final sentence. "We are done being quiet. We are done being afraid. This ends now." By morning, the city was on fire, not with violence, but with voices. Protests swelled to thousands. Calls for resignations flooded City Hall. The mayor, pale and tight-lipped, announced a federal investigation. And Alicia, exhausted but resolute, sat in her kitchen with Simone, watching the coverage in stunned silence. "Is it over?" Simone asked softly. Alicia shook her head. "No, baby," she said. "This is just the beginning." The first arrest came at dawn. A text from Marcus jolted Alicia awake. "Turn on the news. Now." She stumbled into the kitchen, Simone trailing behind her in pajamas, hair wild from sleep. The TV screen filled with flashing red and blue lights, officers in plain clothes being led out of the precinct in handcuffs. The children screamed. Federal agents execute warrants in police corruption probe. Simone blinked hard, rubbing her eyes. "Mom, are those the men from the park?" Alicia's throat tightened. She couldn't force words past the lump in her chest, so she just nodded. "They're scared now," Marcus said when he called minutes later. "The feds have everything they need, the emails, the training memos, the videos. You didn't just crack this open, Alicia. You blew the whole thing apart." By noon, the city was in chaos. The police union president was arrested trying to flee the state. Supervisors resigned in rapid succession. The mayor, pale and visibly shaken, stood before cameras and promised sweeping reform. And everywhere Alicia turned, there were voices that had been silent for years, finally rising. Mothers who had buried their sons. Fathers who had been humiliated in front of their children. People who had been told they didn't matter, who were now demanding to be seen, to be heard, to be counted. For weeks, the headlines didn't stop. Monroe case sparks national reckoning. Federal probe uncovers decades of systemic abuse. You can't do that, viral video becomes rallying cry for change. Simone's shaky voice from that day in the park was played on repeat, a reminder of the moment everything had shifted. And through it all, Alicia kept working. Not in the courtroom. Not yet. But in living rooms and community centers and church basements, helping people file complaints, connecting them with lawyers, teaching them how to document, how to demand, how to fight back. One evening, she found herself standing in front of a packed auditorium, parents, students, activists, neighbors, all of them waiting. The microphone hummed softly as she adjusted it. "I didn't ask to be here," she began. "And if I'm being honest, there were moments I wished I could walk away. But every time I thought about giving up, I saw my daughter's face that day in the park. I heard her voice, steady and brave, saying, 'You can't do that.' And she was right. They can't. And we won't let them anymore." The room erupted, applause, cheers, the sound of a community realizing its own power. But for all the noise, Alicia kept her world small. Dinners with Simone at their kitchen table. Evenings spent curled up on the couch, laughing at old movies. Walks through the park where it had all started, where Simone would glance nervously toward the fountain until Alicia squeezed her hand and said, "We're safe here now." One afternoon, a little girl no older than 8 shyly approached them, clutching a notebook. "Are you the lady from the TV?" she asked. Alicia smiled gently. "I guess I am." "My mom says you're a hero," the girl whispered. Alicia crouched down, meeting her eyes. "Your mom's the hero," she said softly. "She's raising you to be brave." But bravery didn't erase the scars. Some nights, Alicia still woke in a cold sweat, the phantom bite of handcuffs burning her wrists. Simone still startled when she heard sirens, her shoulders tensing until the sound faded. Healing, Alicia realized, wasn't a straight line. It was a circle, a slow, steady reclaiming of the spaces that had been taken. Months later, the city council chamber filled again. This time, it wasn't for testimony. This time, it was for acknowledgement. Alicia sat quietly as the mayor, newly humbled, newly careful, stepped to the microphone. "We failed you," he said plainly. "We failed this city. But because of you, Ms. Monroe, and because of your courage, we have a chance to do better. To be better." He presented her with a plaque, polished wood, engraved words, something meant to symbolize gratitude, progress, change. Alicia accepted it with a polite nod, but what mattered wasn't the plaque. What mattered was Simone, sitting in the front row, her chin high, her pride unmistakable. Later that evening, as the sun sank low and painted the city in warm gold, Alicia and Simone returned to the park. The same park. The same fountain. The same maple tree, its branches swaying in the breeze. But everything felt different. Children laughed without hesitation. Parents watched without fear. And when Alicia and Simone walked across the grass, people smiled, not with suspicion, but with quiet gratitude. They spread their blanket in their old spot. Simone pulled a paperback from her bag. Alicia leaned back on her palms, eyes tilted toward the sky, and for the first time in months, she let herself feel it. "Peace. Mom," Simone said softly, breaking the quiet. "Yeah, baby. Do you think it's really over?" Alicia turned her head, taking in her daughter's face, older somehow, stronger, but still so young. "No," she said honestly. "Not over. But different. Better." Simone considered that, then nodded, as if filing it away as truth. As twilight settled over the park, Alicia closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She thought about the night they took her badge. The nights she sat at this very table, staring at her laptop, wondering if she could keep going. The mornings she'd woken to find Simone curled up on the couch, phone in hand, waiting for her to come home safe. And she thought about this moment, this quiet, this laughter, this hard-earned sense of belonging. It wasn't victory, not really. But it was something just as powerful, survival that had bloomed into strength. Weeks later, when federal indictments were unsealed, Alicia's phone lit up again. Reporters, activists, strangers all wanting quotes, sound bites, statements. She turned the phone face down on the table and looked at Simone. "Pizza?" she asked. Simone grinned. "Extra cheese." "Always." And that night, as they ate greasy slices and watched an old movie for the 100th time, Alicia let herself believe, just for a little while, that the worst was behind them. But she also knew this. They hadn't just fought back. They had built something, a movement, a message, a promise that no one in their community would ever feel as alone as she had in those first terrifying moments. And that promise was worth everything. Months later, on a quiet spring morning, Alicia walked into a community legal clinic she had helped open. The sign on the door read, "The Monroe Center for Justice." Inside, the waiting room buzzed with quiet energy, families filling out forms, volunteers answering questions, kids playing in the corner. At the front desk, Simone sat with a stack of intake packets, her hair pulled into a neat bun, her smile soft but sure. "Busy today?" Alicia asked. Simone grinned. "Always." And Alicia felt it, that same swell of pride, of gratitude, of fierce, unbreakable love, rising up in her chest. This, she realized, was what they had fought for. Not just justice. Not just reform. But the chance to build something better. That afternoon, as they walked home together, Simone slipped her hand into hers. "You know," Simone said softly, "you really are a hero." Alicia smiled, squeezing her daughter's hand. "No, baby," she said. "We both are." And as the sun dipped low, painting their street in shades of gold and rose, Alicia Monroe finally let herself believe it. The park was quiet again that evening. The fountain burbled softly, children chased each other across the grass, and somewhere nearby, a guitar hummed a lazy tune. Alicia and Simone sat on their blanket, sharing a carton of lemon ice, their laughter drifting on the breeze. They didn't talk about the past. They didn't talk about the headlines or the hearings or the fear that had haunted them for so long. They just were. And for the first time in what felt like forever, that was enough. If this story touched you, don't just leave, be part of the family. Yellow heart, hit subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. Smash the like button if you felt the emotion, and don't forget to share this video with someone who needs this message today. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you for being here.